Sanctions are a violation of human rights. According to the Geneva Convention, even in wartime, a nation cannot impose sanctions that collectively punish, disproportionately punish, and indiscriminately punish civilians. So when we're fighting sanctions, we're fighting for the human rights of Zimbabweans to be able to have freedom of development so that they can be able to have the basics. Food, water, healthcare, jobs, and an economy that functions. We're also asking for Zimbabwe to have the right to trade internationally without hindrance. So the problem with sanctions is that they don't stop us from trading with the West only. The West actually put in secondary sanctions that punish anybody else from other countries or third parties that does business with Zimbabwe and then wants to do business with the West.
Jeez.
So for instance, when your banks right now are being pushed to block certain Zimbabweans from having bank accounts in South Africa, and those banks are blocking Zimbabweans from having bank accounts from South Africa without trying those people, all because the United States said that they must do it because those banks are afraid to be removed from the international banking system. They're afraid to have their payments of South Africa being blocked when they're sent through to SWIFT and other international banks. They're scared to have their relationships or corresponding banking relationships with other banks blocked. So that over compliance to sanctions, that third-party imposition of sanctions or implementation of sanctions is what we're fighting for when we say sanctions must be removed.
Sure.
Because they stop us even from trading with South Africa that has got nothing to do with the sanctions on Zimbabwe. However, it has been proved that the banks that are doing these things are doing it when they have no cause to do it.
Sure.
Why do we know this? There's a bank called CBZ in Zimbabwe. It was being forced to implement sanctions. It refused. It traded with companies that were on sanctions list 15,200 times. The United States put a penalty of 3.8 billion that was then reduced to 300 million. And still that bank said, no, we're not going to pay the penalty. So the United States said, you're going to pay the penalty. So these guys went to a law firm and they began legal action. And eventually the United States had to capitulate. They had to cancel their penalties, and that bank continues to open accounts today for people that are under sanctions. So that proves that those sanctions or the penalties or the requirements of the sanctions are unenforceable.
Sure.
That's why the United States couldn't enforce it. So we are saying to South African banks, why are you not doing the same? Why are you not refusing to comply with sanctions? And when you're penalized, you take the United States to courts internationally to fight against this illegality and you being forced to impose an illegality. So my answer to your question is, what are we doing? We are fighting these sanctions and we're utilizing the legal process. Why the legal process? Because they made the rules. They created Roman Dutch law. They created international law. They created human rights law. They created the UN Charter. And now we are holding them accountable to their own rules. The banks in South Africa that are implementing the US sanctions illegally, we're using the South African Constitution to say that you cannot punish anybody without trial. You cannot deny anybody their rights for no reason without court orders or without some form of a due process. So that's why we're doing that. And that's how we're fighting these guys. We're fighting for our right to trade. We're fighting for people to have the right to have accounts. We're fighting for the right for our nation to be able to have our payments cleared, because currently that's what stops us from buying machines for our hospitals, stops us from buying medicines, stops us reindustrializing and buying tools and machinery for our industry. It even stops us from getting certain software. There's certain services, like there was a time that PayPal would not work in Zimbabwe. There's a time that I think right now we got into a point where money transfer services like MoneyGram
Sure.
are struggling to do business in Zimbabwe because of sanctions. We can't have that because we've got relatives all over the world that need to transfer money. They're having blockages.
Sure.
Yeah.